Rihanna, the billionaire who turned music into an empire, once lost $36 million chasing high fashion. How does the world's savviest celebrity investor misfire this hard? Today, we unpack the untold business mechanics behind Rihanna's failed luxury brand with Louis Vuitton and why it collapsed, who took the biggest hit, and what it teaches every entrepreneur about scaling too fast in elite markets. How does someone with global dominance across music, beauty, and fashion still lose $36 million? The answer begins with a dangerous assumption that celebrity power guarantees brand trust. Rihanna's fans worship her, but luxury consumers operate by a different currency: heritage and exclusivity. When Fenty Mason launched, it was the first new brand under LVMH in decades, a huge statement of faith. Yet prestige markets don't respond to fame, they respond to lineage. Consumers buying Dior or Vuitton aren't seeking novelty, they're buying legacy. Rihanna entered a room where money mattered less than mystique, and her name alone couldn't rewrite those centuries of perception. It sounded like the perfect alliance. Rihanna, a visionary creative backed by the world's largest luxury group, but the structure of the deal blurred control and responsibility. LVMH owned the infrastructure. Rihanna supplied the image. That meant she carried the public risk while LVMH managed the margins. Insiders later revealed that decisions moved slowly, approvals were centralized, and the creative spontaneity that fueled her earlier success hit bureaucratic walls. It was a partnership on paper but not in practice. When a brand needs agility, corporate governance becomes an anchor, not a lifeline. The partnership's brilliance became its bottleneck. Just as Fenty Mason began building traction, the world closed its doors. Global retail collapsed by nearly a quarter in 2020, and the luxury sector froze almost overnight. Even established houses with decades of loyal clientele suffered. A newcomer stood little chance. Fenty's small retail footprint made it vulnerable, and high-priced items looked tone-deaf as economic anxiety spread. The brand couldn't pivot to digital fast enough, and production halts further stalled momentum. For a fledgling luxury label, timing is oxygen, and the pandemic cut off the air supply. What might have been a slow burn suddenly became an unsustainable expense. When Fenty Mason's first collection debuted, many fans expected accessible glamour. What they found were $900 denim jackets and minimalist silhouettes rivaling high couture pricing. Rihanna aimed to merge inclusivity with luxury, but pricing told a different story. Her beauty empire thrived because it welcomed everyone. Fenty Mason alienated the very audience that made her powerful. Instead of bridging the gap between street and high fashion, the brand fell into the void between them. Price became a barrier, not a statement. Consumers admired the ambition but not enough to buy in, and luxury veterans dismissed it as overreaching celebrity retail. Luxury thrives on rarity. Gen Z thrives on accessibility. Rihanna's brand tried to court both, promising high-end design with mass-market values. It's a paradox no business model has resolved. The new generation values inclusivity, gender fluidity, and transparency, ideals the old luxury guard still resists. Fenty Mason tried to rewrite those rules by offering luxury without exclusion, but tradition pushed back. Established buyers questioned authenticity, while younger audiences balked at four-figure price tags. The result was confusion. An identity too inclusive for luxury, yet too expensive for mainstream appeal. The brand spoke fluently in both languages but convinced no one. From the start, even insiders struggled to categorize Fenty Mason. Was it streetwear dressed up as couture or couture pretending to be street? The collections mixed oversized silhouettes with architectural tailoring, an aesthetic neither clearly defined nor historically grounded. That ambiguity diluted its power. Fashion thrives on clarity. Consumers need to instantly recognize what a brand stands for. In trying to be groundbreaking, Fenty Mason became difficult to place. Retail buyers hesitated, media narratives splintered, and the line between innovation and inconsistency blurred. A luxury label can experiment, but it must still project a single, unmistakable point of view. In the early months, digital data whispered warning signs. Repeat purchases lagged, and engagement metrics on new collections dropped. The excitement of launch hype faded fast. Rather than adjusting strategy, leadership doubled down on aesthetics over analytics. Fashion may be an art, but retail is a numbers game. Without analyzing purchasing behavior, inventory planning misfired and product development outpaced demand. A pattern emerged: visually acclaimed collections that didn't convert into sales. Many startups make this mistake, but in luxury, the cost is magnified by scale. Data could have guided course corrections if only it had been listened to. Rihanna's personal brand was both her greatest asset and her quietest liability. Her global visibility meant Fenty Mason was instantly famous, but not necessarily credible. Consumers associated her name with pop culture, not Paris ateliers. The fashion elite, notoriously protective of tradition, viewed the project as celebrity spectacle rather than creative evolution. When personality overshadows product, authenticity blurs. Every campaign, interview, and launch centered on Rihanna herself, leaving little space for the clothes to build their own narrative. Fame amplified awareness but diluted mystique. In luxury, the product must whisper sophistication. Fenty shouted celebrity. Behind the polished facade of luxury conglomerates lies a maze of internal competition. Fenty Mason entered a crowded house that already hosted titans like Dior and Givenchy, each with legacy designers and loyal clientele. Within LVMH, priorities are tiered. New brands rarely receive equal attention. Executives who greenlit Fenty faced pressure to prove quick returns, but slower-performing divisions naturally absorbed fewer resources. This imbalance bred friction. Creative teams clashed over vision, marketing, and funding allocations. Decisions stalled, and innovation suffocated in corporate formalities. What began as a groundbreaking collaboration gradually became another file in a very large portfolio. When headlines announced that Fenty Mason would pause operations, the wording was deliberate. LVMH didn't use the word shutdown, signaling an intent to preserve brand equity. In luxury, perception is everything. Closing too loudly can damage investor confidence, so the suspension was quiet, controlled, and face-saving for both sides. The move allowed inventory liquidation without reputational fallout, a calculated exit disguised as a strategic pause. Behind the scenes, teams were reallocated and warehouses emptied. The brand's digital presence faded with little fanfare, as if it had never existed, a textbook example of damage control at the highest level. For Rihanna, the most expensive loss wasn't financial, it was focus. During Fenty Mason's run, her time was split between creative direction, product approvals, and corporate meetings. That energy could have fueled her booming beauty and lingerie empires. While the $36 million loss drew headlines, the intangible cost was momentum diverted from proven success. Fenty Beauty and Savage X Fenty thrived on agility and emotional connection, qualities slowed by the Mason experiment. In business, every investment has an opportunity cost, and distraction is often the priciest one. The lesson was brutal but clarifying. Bandwidth, not cash, determines sustainability. Once the luxury line was shelved, Rihanna's team redirected resources to the ventures that worked. Marketing, creative talent, and operational budgets were refocused on Fenty Beauty's expansion and Savage X Fenty's global scaling. The pivot was swift, deliberate, and humble. Instead of chasing prestige, she doubled down on accessibility, a space she had already mastered. This decision restored growth momentum within months and reinforced her position as a dominant beauty entrepreneur. By reframing the loss as reinvestment, she demonstrated that adaptability outweighs pride. The brand that stumbled in couture became a powerhouse in cosmetics and lingerie almost overnight. Industry veterans quietly predicted Fenty Mason's short life. Bernard Arnault, the architect of LVMH's empire, has long championed patience as the ultimate luxury asset. Every major house under his leadership took decades to mature into icons. Fenty Mason's rapid rollout contradicted that rhythm. Traditional luxury relies on heritage storytelling and slow, deliberate refinement values incompatible with modern celebrity timelines. When the brand tried to scale in months what others built in centuries, the tension showed. The veterans weren't rooting against Rihanna, they were watching history repeat itself. Luxury rewards longevity, and speed remains its most unforgiving enemy. Rihanna's ambition to redefine luxury was bold, even noble. She sought to create a space where inclusivity coexisted with couture, a concept fashion had rarely embraced. But innovation carries invisible expenses: education, skepticism, and resistance. Industry buyers didn't know how to position the brand, and consumers couldn't categorize it. Every disruptive vision pays a toll before acceptance, and Fenty Mason's balance sheet reflected that cost. It challenged norms faster than the market could adapt. In retrospect, its failure wasn't purely strategic, it was temporal. The world admired the idea, but the infrastructure of luxury wasn't ready to evolve that quickly. Despite Rihanna's digital prowess through Fenty Beauty, her luxury venture never translated that energy online. The Masons' e-commerce felt sterile, lacking the emotional pulse her audience expected. Social content was minimal, and collaborations rare. While competitors used digital storytelling to humanize opulence, Fenty Mason remained aloof, more catalog than conversation. In an era where online presence drives desirability, the absence was glaring. Digital engagement isn't optional in modern luxury, it's currency. Without consistent narrative touchpoints, consumers forgot the brand between launches. The paradox deepened. Rihanna, a digital native, owned a label that spoke like an institution from another century. The $36 million figure sounds catastrophic, but for LVMH it was a rounding error. The group's annual revenue exceeds $80 billion, and experimental lines are budgeted risks. For Rihanna, though, the reputational stakes were enormous. Her name was the brand. A failed Mason meant headlines questioning her business acumen. The asymmetric exposure defined the venture's fragility: corporate resilience on one side, personal vulnerability on the other. For conglomerates, failure is data. For individuals, it's narrative. The optics mattered more than the balance sheet. Rihanna had entered an ecosystem built for endurance, yet she bore its consequences in public view. After the Fenty Mason fallout, Rihanna quietly reshaped her empire's foundation. Future ventures granted her full equity control, no shared governance, no diluted authority. Savage X Fenty and Fenty Beauty became textbook examples of celebrity-led ownership done right. She negotiated from a position of experience, understanding that creative freedom only matters when backed by decision-making power. The shift wasn't just strategic, it was philosophical. She no longer sought validation from luxury conglomerates, but built ecosystems she entirely owned. The financial loss transformed into leverage, giving her independence to dictate brand direction without compromise or corporate interference ever again. Rihanna's experience mirrors a broader movement reshaping modern entrepreneurship. Celebrities entering business are discovering that influence is not infrastructure. Building a luxury brand demands more than a following, it requires operations, logistics, heritage storytelling, and patience. The line between star and CEO is seductive but perilous. Many underestimate the grind behind luxury's polished image, where profit cycles span years, not months. Fenty Mason's rise and fall crystallized the reality that fame opens doors but cannot sustain them. It's a cautionary tale reverberating across industries, from tech to fashion, marking the end of effortless celebrity capitalism. Rihanna's $36 million loss was not the end of her business story, it was the inflection point. The experiment with Louis Vuitton revealed how fragile even the most powerful brands can be when timing, positioning, and identity misalign. Yet from that collapse emerged one of the most dominant female entrepreneurs of her generation. Failure became her tuition and ownership her graduation. The brand may have vanished, but the lesson became part of her legend. In the evolving world of celebrity-led business, few recover this elegantly and even fewer turn loss into legacy.